Good afternoon, everybody. It's a delight to have everybody here. My name is Jim Wood. I'm chair of Wood Communications Group and serve as strategic counsel to Competitive Wisconsin. As hopefully folks know, there's going to be an event held that we are convening jointly with 7Rivers Alliance on April 14th to talk about early childhood care and education challenges and opportunities. The focus there is predominantly going to be on the opportunity side and how we move forward on this issue. As we've done in the past, however, we don't want to overlook a harder, deeper look at some of the issues confronting us right now. Our guests today to help me do that are Ruth Schmidt, who's the executive director of the Wisconsin Early Care Association, Dennis Winters, who is the chief economist for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, and Chris Hardy, who is the president and CEO of 7Rivers Alliance. Thank you all for being here today. Dennis, I'm going to start with you and say, we want to take a look at a couple of different pieces of the equation, but you're the economist. Can you help the audience understand the economics of the challenge that we face in terms of if we don't, where we stand at the moment, if you would?
Well, I think basically you're talking about Wisconsin's economic prosperity in the future, and as we've talked about for some time, Wisconsin's labor force is topping out, growing very slowly, may even go negative by 2035. It becomes concomitant then that we work to raise the productivity of the workforce so we can pay them more, and with that comes you have to match the technology with the talent. And if we don't have the talent, we're not going to be able to take advantage of the technology. And what we've seen is we boil back on this on college education and K through 12, boils down to where we're coming up a little short is on the early childhood development. And the studies have been done time and time again for years now across the spectrum of early childhood development programs that the return to early childhood development is long-lived, essentially risk-free, and in perpetuity. And the studies done at the University of Chicago and the Minneapolis Fed show that the returns are essentially unmatched. So 16 to 1 or 17 to 1 or a 16% annual rate of return going forward. So the basis is on our future workforce, and that's something that has to be started. Had we done this, had we begun this some time ago, we would be reaping the benefits of all of that. And so now we're at this situation and going forward. Jim, I go back to the old forester, right? When was the best time to plant a tree? Well, it's 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So we knew about this for some time. We didn't get the tree in the ground. We've got to do it now.
And you think, just follow up on that, Dennis. So your take on it is that we're not doing the job we need to be doing at the moment. That's already impacting the tax base. That's already impacting our capacity to recruit people, et cetera. Ruth, can you give us a glimpse of what that looks like from a provider point of view and the consumer point of view in terms of where we find ourselves at the moment?
Yeah, I think to me, one of the most perplexing parts of this equation is the fact that childcare is really expensive for parents, chewing up upwards of 30% of the median household income for a family of 4 with 2 children in care. And then the flip side of that is that people who work in early care and education, so childcare program operators, early childhood educators, are earning poverty level wages. So in Wisconsin, we know that women who are providing care out of their home in a regulated family childcare setting on average end up making about $7.49 an hour in terms of what they end up after expenses of operating their program. So $7.49 an hour. And then if you look at teachers in group childcare settings across the state of Wisconsin, you're seeing wages hovering around $12 an hour, obviously swinging less in rural communities across our state and slightly higher in some of our urban settings in Wisconsin. But the bottom line is, childcare does not bring in enough revenue to cover the cost of operating a high quality childcare program. It's expensive to provide high quality childcare because you need quality staff, you need space, you need insurance, you need equipment, you need materials, curriculum, food sources for running your program, which doesn't leave you much over in terms of what you have available to pay your staff. And when you pair that with parents being tapped out and not being able to afford $12,000 a year for infant care, in some markets, in other markets of the state, that pushes $18,000 to $20,000 a year for infant care. You can see where there's this breakdown where childcare gets talked about as being a failed market. There is not a way for childcare programs to create more of their supply without charging more for it, and consumers can't pay more for it. So there's a failure, and we have to be thinking creatively about what are the potential fixes and who ends up helping to maximize the revenue that's in programs and how they use it, and maximize additional revenue that can come into this industry.
Let me ask you, Ruth, is this an issue that is unique or the status quo at the moment to Wisconsin, or is this pretty much happening everywhere across the country?
This is happening across the entire United States. This has been happening prior to COVID. I think COVID has exacerbated it and brought it more to the forefront because as we've had parents trying to get back into the labor force, as we have businesses trying to hire people, we're finding out that the workforce shortages in childcare are such that in many regions of the state, there's simply no care available. Prior to COVID, the Bipartisan Policy Center had already sort of analyzed care in Wisconsin and said we had a gap of care for about 40% of children under the age of 5 that had all available parents in the workforce. And the economic losses of that, they had calculated to be somewhere between $2.5 to $3.5 billion a year to Wisconsin. So this was already a brewing issue, and I think the past 2 years have simply exacerbated it and made it more of an issue for communities and certainly for businesses to be at the table with us, helping to think about solutions for how do we address this.
And on that segue, let me ask Chris if he could give us some insight into how this is playing out in the 7Rivers area in terms of employers, in terms of the community, in terms of families, et cetera.
Yeah, we've been looking at the issue and the challenge of childcare for almost 5 years now, after we did a very comprehensive workforce development plan back in 2017 to really take a deep dive into, yeah, we know that we're short of workers, but what are the factors that are causing that? And the three big challenges that emerged were childcare, housing, and transportation. And so we started to do some local research and a lot of partnership in our region to dig into that childcare dilemma. And what we found is, as Ruth has stated, that there is a significant gap. We have a number of childcare deserts in our region. In fact, late last year, our region of the state was about 6,000 slots short of what we need. And to put that in perspective, we need workers. And what our studies have shown is that there's a significant number of people sitting on the sidelines that would like to work but can't because they can't find childcare, or they're working part-time, or they're working odd shifts. So we have a number of people who I would call underemployed that could significantly help our workforce if we could find them the childcare, and also to make it affordable, as Ruth alluded to, because that becomes the challenge too. If we're not paying these workers enough money, it becomes a dilemma for them, particularly when child 2 comes around, to say, yeah, we just can't afford to have both of us working and to be paying for childcare for 2. So then one stays home. And so I think we're going to find that to continue to be a challenge when it comes to recruiting and retaining workers. So we need to, the business community needs to wrap their arms around this issue and understand that they have a seat at the table when it comes to innovative ways of creating partnerships and collaborations that maybe can answer specific child challenges in their community. And I guess I would point and emphasize that point, that while there are universal challenges in childcare, each community may have specific challenges that they need to address and answer, that there is no one size fits all solution for childcare, but it needs to be part of a comprehensive community conversation.
Let me ask about that 6,000 discrepancy number or gap number. Does that reflect both people who have signed up but can't get in, so they're on waiting lists essentially, and people who may not have signed up because they don't think they can afford it? Are both of those groups in there?
Sure, and I'm going to defer that question to Ruth because I think she's better equipped to answer the analysis behind to answer the gap question.
Yeah, so if it's all right, I'll jump in. I think that what we know is that when we look at regulated slots, and this is what Chris is talking about, the change in regulated slots of care that are available in a given region of the state. So Wisconsin can track on that really tightly and say, this is how many slots of care we have in Western Wisconsin. This is how many slots of care we have that are regulated in Southeast Wisconsin. And what Chris is getting at is the discrepancy between what was available and what's available now in terms of slots of care, and a loss of 6,000 slots. What I would say in addition to that is that when we talk about slots, we aren't even getting to the depth of this, which is, do we even have teachers to work in available slots of care? So there might be regulated slots, but if there's no teachers that are in those classrooms, those slots aren't even available. So it becomes this is sort of a piling on of issues that happen in childcare. So it has been a loss of regulated slots. And then on top of that, I think it's very hard to even know how many of those slots can even be filled based on the shortage we see in childcare in terms of not having adequate teachers coming into the classroom.
So let me ask this question. As a segue, what I'd like to do is to, so we've got the situation as you've laid it out in terms of the community, in terms of providers and consumers, and in terms of the tax base and the economy. Part of what I think is important is to understand that we're not living at a static point in time. Things just don't stop here. So other communities, other states grappling with the same set of challenges are either doing something or they're not doing something. And that means they're either getting more competitive in keeping and recruiting workers or they're not, okay? And same goes for Wisconsin. Part of being able to figure out where you go here, however, it seems to me, is to be able to have pretty accurate data about what it is you're trying to get accomplished. And so if I go back to this number in the 7Rivers area, and what I'm hearing is we're saying, well, some of it is because people actually have signed up and they can't get in, but in that area, it may be that the spots are there, but we don't have the workforce to be able to take care of them. So that's one kind of problem. Another box is that people haven't even bothered to get in line because they look at what it costs and say, I can't afford it, or I don't like the one that's in my neighborhood or the quality, or I can't get to it. Is that right? I mean, so I think that's kind of, so my question is this. On the broadband front, what people discovered was they went to get FEC data on where there was fiber optics laid, et cetera, and try to understand how bad it was or what we needed to do. And they decided that data wasn't solid enough. It didn't give them the depth that they needed. And so we've now gone out and mapped Wisconsin, and I have the sense based on, my question is this, do we now know more about broadband locations and where it is, the fiber is, that we know about where the kids are or could be and they're not? I mean, do we need more data on this piece?
Jim, if you're directing that to me, what I can tell you is there is no data system right now that tracks where children are in care. The child care counts system that the state has set up. So child care counts is a system through which a lot of the COVID relief dollars that have come into child care have passed through child care counts to get into the bank accounts of childcare programs across the state so they can keep their doors open and reduce rates for parents that have kids there. And that is coming the closest we have to knowing how many kids are in care. There is no data system outside of childcare counts that tracks how many children are in every single childcare regulated program across the state of Wisconsin. We can track how many children are on the subsidy program in different childcare programs across the state. But within the universe of all kids that are in care, and then if you layer on top of it, we know there's a lot of children who are in unregulated care, which is another, there's no way to track what those numbers look like right now. So the data piece, I think, and it's not unique to Wisconsin. This is a data conundrum that we have nationally in terms of where are our kids.
Dennis, on the same front, if we look out over the next year to 2 years, okay, so what I'm hearing is we clearly are going to need some stronger data to be able to pinpoint and figure out what we're trying to get done. On your side of the equation, where the tax bases are being affected by the workforce shortages and by our failure to be able to get better in-migration numbers, what does that look like over the next couple of years? If you take a look at local government in terms of public services, public safety, fire, police, education, whatever it may be, how grim a picture is that? I mean, are you concerned that that curve, that bend gets steeper over the next couple of years?
Well, yeah, I mean, by 25, our projections that the workforce actually goes negative. And one of the things that has been done in the early childhood development world is the return on investments, because 80% of that return goes to the public and 20% goes to the individual. So there's, on the tax-based side of it, between lower costs in schools, lower costs in incarceration. For example, I mean, we spend a lot of money, per person incarcerated a year, and very little on early childhood development. And we know that the returns on getting early childhood development and into K through 12 and then graduated and becoming a contributor to society is greatly overshadowed by the public cost of not having that happen. So it's one of these, fix it now or fix it later, pay me now or pay me later type things. And the returns are without argument, it's been demonstrated, the returns. And Robert Lynch, particularly in Wisconsin, the returns actually turned positive in 8 years. And this is not a 20-year horizon we're looking at. These benefits accrue almost immediately, certainly medium and longer term, as we see all sorts of returns coming out of quality childcare provisions. Yeah.
So Chris, before you decided to help 7Rivers Alliance, you were the editor of the La Crosse Tribune for a number of years and watched that community tell itself a story day by day in your newspaper. When you listen to these stories about what's happening to the capacity of the tax base to support fundamentals like public safety and education and the challenges we face in terms of trying to figure out how to get to affordable health, child care and education and reach, if you will. What does the 7Rivers area look like if we don't address this issue over the next couple of years?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that our businesses will not be as successful as they could be. If they can't find the workforce that they need, then they won't be able to expand. They may need to retract some of their plans. This has a direct economic impact on our state and on our region. And so that's why I think that the one progress that we have made is the business community is now at the table and they're listening to this because they understand the challenge that the lack of childcare has to their bottom line. We've done surveys in our region, and they're pretty much consistent across the board that a significant number of our workers acknowledged that when they don't have adequate childcare, they spend time at work dealing with childcare issues. That is a loss of productivity for our companies. And we also know that companies are spending a lot of money to recruit and retain workers that they could spend less on if there was some solution to childcare. So the answer is we will continue to struggle unless we can answer this question. And I'd submit from a larger perspective, from a statewide perspective, that we could become a great place for young families to live and work if we could solve this childcare challenge. As Dennis and everyone else knows, this isn't unique to Wisconsin. You know, this is a nationwide trend just based on demographics. But we, because of the quality of life that we have, and I think the other assets that we can sell as a state as a great place to live and work, if we can come up with some childcare solutions, I think we could quickly turn around some of the challenges we have in finding workforce.
So what I'm hearing is, obviously, it's a serious issue. Obviously, it affects not just families and children, but communities and employers and the economy and the whole ball of wax. I hear each of you persuaded that if we can fix this, good things happen, okay? In order to have those good things happen, you've got some very specific kinds of issues that have been put on the table. And I'd like to spend our last few minutes kind of talking about those opportunities and how you see that intersecting with the current American Rescue Plan fund or ACT funds that are available to local units of government and to the state. And I'd ask you to do a couple of things. One, Dennis, you talked about that you think the returns become available pretty quickly. And I'd ask you to talk about that because, you know, there's a school of thought that some of them don't, you know, that if the data that's been generated so far regarding reduced incarceration or what you have to look at, you're looking at a 12 to 14 year, you know, outreach sort of piece. So I'm going to ask you to start with your sense of what the turnaround looks like and what kind of opportunities you think are there. I'd ask each of you as you take a crack at it to also talk a little bit about how do we make sure that this is, given this one-time money, that we are looking at investments that produce return on an investment as opposed to subsidies that create expanded demand perhaps in the future. So.
And Jim, before I address that, I just want to interject some data. We talked about the U.S. Census Bureau on a household pulse survey for Wisconsin. You know, so there's almost 120,000 kids that were not able to attend childcare due to the pandemic. So this is just a kind of a microcosm, right, of those kids that couldn't attend because they were infected or exposed to COVID. So that's 30,000, 40,000 workers, right, that are interrupted schedules, that are not in the workplace, but they're at home taking care of children. So if you were to expand that into, childcare, that's going to open up an opportunity for businesses to have more people from whom to select for workers. So, and as far as the returns on investment, I mean, it's been shown almost immediately that we get benefits in there as far as drops in the cost of special education, drops in the cost of teacher turnover, absenteeism, substitute teachers, things like that happen almost immediately. Not to mention the things that Chris, talked about, that if you go to work with a sick kid, where's your mind, on the job? So, and then other things that play out over time. Just the better civility of children coming out, and the tax base is higher, the tax payments are higher, home ownership is higher, even pregnancies are fewer and further between. I mean, the list goes on and on about, not to mention the whole healthcare part of it. The list goes on and on about what the returns are to get early childhood development and then get success into reading scores essentially by third grade, where there's that fulcrum between learning to read and reading to learn. That's 8 years old. So we got to get them prepared to go into this stuff. And again, the returns are just there. Businesses get it. They understand what an ROI is on investment. And we've been told that, we get it. What can we do?
Bruce?
Yeah, lots of things popping in my brain as I listen to this discussion. So one thing I would say is, and Chris alluded to this, there are communities across Wisconsin that are coming together to have discussions about what are we going to do about childcare, right? So there's, the Richland County Child Care Task Force. There's the Early Childhood Network in Milwaukee. There is the Jackson County Child Care Network. There's groups through economic development regions, Prosperity Southwest region of the state, the Grow North region of the state. There's workforce development boards that are participating in these discussions. Every community is grappling with this. And in childcare, we know that 3/4 of childcare programs right now are looking for staff. So there's a huge disconnect here between how our economy can function and what we need to do to ensure that that keeps happening, right? And when you talk about solutions for this, you've got a range. You've got the Common Council of Milwaukee is putting $7 million of the city local ARPA recovery dollars into childcare. $5 million of that is going to go into stipends to pay early childhood educators while they have that money. Is it sustainable? Possibly not over time, but will it be a huge infusion to ensure that childcare can continue operating in the short term in Milwaukee until we figure out what is this bigger solution for Wisconsin, until we move the dialogue into understanding this is public discourse, this is public good that we're talking about, what Dennis is talking about in terms of return on investment. It's a return on investment in a public good that we should be doing, right? You got Jackson County put $105,000 into stipends for their workforce. I just had a conversation with the economic development lead in Rock County yesterday about what can we do to solve childcare solution or to solve childcare problems in Rock County. Every community is grappling with this. And there's local solutions which are critical, and how we learn from those local solutions to take broader regional action, to take statewide action. But ultimately, if this market continues to rely solely on parents to foot the bill for childcare, we're going to continue to have a significant disconnect on our hand in terms of availability of affordable care. And then I think there's also, I want to say, there's huge solutions, right? There's the $2.5 billion solution of can we make childcare free for all kids in Wisconsin, right? We're nowhere near that solution. The state of Wisconsin just recently did an employer survey. I think they had close to 2,600 responses to this employer survey. And I'm just looking at the data quickly right now. 29% of businesses that responded say that they're offering employer-sponsored flexible spending accounts. Flexible spending accounts are an incredibly low-cost solution for businesses to be able to offer to all of their employees so that employees can pay for their dependent care expenses pre-tax, save money while they're doing it. There's small solutions all the way up to what are the huge big ticket items that we all need to be working on to try and advance how we stabilize what's going on in care.
Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, to add to what Ruth said, as I said before, each community needs to address specifically what their community might need. But I think that underlying all of this is that we need to, as a state, embrace and lift up the value of what our childcare workers do. Part of the challenge that they have in terms of I think the pandemic absolutely accelerated the departure of workers in childcare because they were still there trying their best in the middle of a pandemic, and all of a sudden around them other businesses are raising wages, And man, you can go down the street and all of a sudden you can make $10 more an hour with benefits. And what it did was it drove out, I think, some people who, given their choice, they might have stayed in childcare, but they didn't have a financial choice. So they had to find a new career. We can't solve the compensation challenge overnight, but we better start now, or we're going to have even more of a challenge bringing people into childcare. But part of what we can do as a community is to thank those people, to create an environment that lifts the work that they do, so that we know that they appreciate it. I also think that we have an opportunity for our public schools to form stronger partnerships with childcare. One of the challenges we had with childcare was actually created by public schools, not intentionally, but when they went into all-day kindergarten and 4K programs, the school districts reached into childcare centers and took away part of their profit center with the older children that they make more money off of than they do with infant care. No one makes money off of infant care, I've been told anyway. So now we're in an opportunity where school districts maybe can, with declining enrollment, they may have space. Maybe they can, given some community partnerships, be locations for childcare to remove some of the costs that the childcare centers might otherwise bear, in a sense, making them more profitable. I think when it comes to the ARPA dollars, I hope that that there's some bold experiments tried, because again, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this, but I'm hoping that some communities are going to try some things. We'll see if they work, and if they work, then we can dig into how we can make those ideas sustainable. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities that will be coming out of this.